Hey guys, tonight we're wandering somewhere ancient, somewhere dry, and somewhere you definitely wouldn't survive for long. Ancient Egypt. You've got sand in your sandals already. The smell of the Nile floating on the evening air, and the faint sound of distant drums carrying across a city alive with ritual and routine. But beneath all that timeless wonder lies a silent danger. Something invisible, patient, and utterly merciless: smallpox. You probably won't survive this one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you isn't the heat, it's the hum. A deep layered chorus of buzzing insects, merchants shouting, children laughing, and donkeys braying. You stand on the edge of the Nile Delta, the ancient lifeline that snakes through a land that hasn't changed much in thousands of years. Papyrus reeds shimmer in the sunset, and a fisherman waves lazily, his net heavy with silver flashes. Somewhere upstream, temple bells toll for Ra's departure into the underworld. You smell life and death in the same breath. Fish scales, lotus flowers, sweat, and smoke mix into a perfume only this civilization could produce. And then there's the human smell, raw and dense, pressing close in a world with no soap advertisements or germ theory. You make your way down the mud-packed street, past walls painted with scenes of gods watching over farmers, scribes, and bakers. The air vibrates with the slap of sandals and the clang of bronze tools. Everyone has a purpose here, but not everyone looks healthy. A young boy coughs near the well, the kind of dry, hacking sound that sticks in your ears. People glance but say nothing. His mother dips a clay jug into the same water moments later. You look at the bucket's rim, smooth from use, chipped from age, and now carrying more than just cool water. You don't know it yet, but the droplets sparkle with invisible death. Egypt, after all, is alive because of the Nile, and dying because of it too. The same river that floods with promise also gathers filth, animal waste, and bacteria, baking everything into a fertile growth under the sun. You can wash your hands here, sure, but you'll probably make things worse. The people around you are resilient though. They've survived for millennia on mud, stone, and divine faith. They look up to the gods, Ra, Osiris, and Sekhmet, to balance sickness and health. Sekhmet, the lion, headed goddess of plague and healing, receives special offerings this season. Her priests burn incense thicker than fog, chanting prayers that sound halfway between song and warning. A local man notices your pale confusion. "You are not from here," he says with a crooked smile. "You smell like a foreigner. Careful with your skin. The sun eats strangers fast." He's right. Even the air feels heavy, as if it wants to cook you from the inside. Your sandals stick to the ground as you walk past a half-flooded alley. Kids splash, laughing, throwing handfuls of river mud at one another. You think it's charming, until one of them wipes his arm and you catch a glimpse of small raised dots. You tell yourself it's nothing. Bug bites, maybe. Historians still argue whether smallpox first came here through trade with Nubia or through ships drifting from Mesopotamia, but what's clear is that the disease found Egypt to be a perfect home. Hot, crowded, and deeply connected. The great paradox of this civilization is how advanced it is, and how helpless it can still be. You pass a scribe sitting cross-legged, writing on a papyrus scroll. His pen strokes are elegant, his focus absolute. He's recording grain tallies for the pharaoh's stores. Yet beside him a rat darts through the sackcloth, unnoticed. Civilization's precision and pestilence, side by side. A fly lands on your cheek, fat and insistent. You brush it away, but more come. They hover near open wounds, near food, near life. The locals don't even flinch. They've learned to coexist with what you can't stand. By sunset, you reach a riverside tavern of sorts, a shaded nook with jugs of beer made from barley and bread. The drink is thick, yeasty, and faintly sour, but it's safer than the water. The tavern keeper tells you, beer is the Nile, purified by gods. You almost laugh, but then remember microbes. Those invisible monsters you worry about haven't been imagined yet. They live unnamed, undetected, and unfeared. A group of workers enters, dusty from hauling limestone at a construction site, probably building a nobleman's tomb. Their laughter turns into coughing fits. You catch the phrase, bad air, tossed around. The idea that sickness comes from foul smells, miasma, dominates thought here. And in a way, they're not completely wrong. There's truth hidden in myth. Outside, the evening deepens. Torches burn along the city's edge. You walk through a narrow lane lined with mud, brick homes. The sound of a woman grinding grain echoes in rhythm, soothing and ancient. Chickens shuffle past your feet. A cat watches from the shadows, its eyes reflecting torchlight. Cats are sacred here, protectors against snakes and evil spirits. And, conveniently, pretty good at catching rats. You can't help admiring the order of it all. Despite the chaos, life follows a rhythm: sunrise, labor, offerings, sleep. But disease plays its own tune beneath the melody, one you're just starting to hear. In the distance, someone sneezes. A pause follows. Then laughter. Relief. People treat sickness like superstition here, a thing to appease rather than fight. You recall reading somewhere that smallpox leaves lifelong scars. Those distinctive pitted marks that even mummies sometimes reveal. In fact, one mummy of Pharaoh Ramses V shows lesions historians believe to be evidence of the very disease now creeping toward you. You wander toward the river again, drawn by the shimmer of moonlight on the water. The air cools a little. You pass fishermen mending nets, priests lighting braziers, and lovers whispering by the reeds. Everyone carries on, unaware that history is about to turn feverish. Suddenly, a shout. Two men rush from a hut, carrying a third between them. His skin glistens, his breath shallow. They call for a healer. You glimpse him, eyes rolling back, chest trembling. He's barely conscious. They lay him down by the water, pouring beer over his forehead, muttering prayers. The healer arrives, wearing amulets carved with protective hieroglyphs. He touches the man's pulse, whispers something to the gods, and prescribes rest. Always rest. You want to say something, maybe to tell them about viruses, vaccinations, quarantine, but you can't. You're just a traveler, a ghost among the living, bound to watch the inevitable unfold. When the sick man's breathing slows, his friends begin to chant. Not a morning song yet, more like a plea. Sekhmet, turn away your wrath. The words slip through the night air, riding the scent of myrrh and sweat. Tomorrow, that chant will echo across a dozen doorways. And by the week's end, the river city will feel very different. But for now, the torches flicker, and the Nile keeps flowing, as it always does, quietly carrying both life and death downstream. You stand there, heart heavy, eyes reflecting the starlight that the ancients believed were the souls of the dead. Somewhere among them, perhaps, float those lost to the first whispers of plague. And you realize in this world, 24 hours is already a luxury. You wake to sound before sight, a crackle of morning fires, the steady grind of stone mills, and the first calls of market vendors echoing through narrow lanes of packed earth and reed. The air is thick with dust and barley, alive with that peculiar blend of life and decay that makes ancient cities hum. You stretch under a rough linen sheet, still sticky from last night's sweat. Sleep isn't easy here. Not when even the air feels like it's judging your every breath. The Nile mist lingers over rooftops, softening everything in a honey-colored haze. You step out into it, blinking as the first rays of sunlight catch the dust motes and make them shimmer like gold flakes. The city's heartbeat is already strong. Footsteps, laughter, clanging metal, distant chanting. It feels alive, but if you listen carefully, there's a rhythm missing. People move a little too quickly. Some doorways are closed. Others are marked with strange red smears of clay. The market waits for you like a labyrinth of sound. You follow the smell first. Roasted duck, onions frying in oil, flatbread baking on open stones. But then the less pleasant notes hit you: donkey dung, fish gone too long in the sun, sweat soaked into linen. Ancient Egypt's perfume is never subtle. Still, you can't help but marvel. Spices from Punt, incense from the Red Sea coast, and baskets of figs that glow like jewels. The hum of barter fills the air, the art of negotiation, perfected over centuries. 3 deben, a woman shouts, waving a jar of honey. It's pure, from temple bees. 2, the buyer counters, not even looking up. 2 and your mother's curse. She snaps back. He laughs. The deal is done. Everywhere you turn, you see evidence of a system so well oiled it could run forever. But beneath the laughter and haggling, you catch whispers. A trader rubbing a rash on his neck. A mother pulling her child's hand away from touching coins. The invisible anxiety clings to the air like smoke. You reach for a handful of dates. Sticky. Sun-warmed, sweet enough to make you forget the heat for a moment. And the vendor eyes you curiously. You're not from here, he says. Be careful where you touch. You ask what he means. He shrugs. There's something in the wind. People say it came from the south. Others say the gods are testing us again. He spits to the side, a quick warding gesture. Sekhmet is angry. She smells blood. You smile politely, pretending you understand, though your pulse quickens. He's not talking about myth. He's talking about disease. In the crowd, you see it again. A man scratching his wrist absently, another turning away to cough into his tunic. The city's elegance hides a slow unraveling. You pass a group of musicians playing at the market edge. Their flutes trill, tambourines jingle, and for a moment, everything feels festive. But then one of them stops to wipe his forehead. The cloth comes away wet and dark. You pretend not to notice. The rhythm continues. The Egyptians believed in balance, Ma'at, the cosmic order that kept chaos, Isfet, at bay. It governed everything: justice, the Nile's floods, even health. You can almost feel that philosophy crack under your feet. Every cough sounds like a thread snapping. A priest from the nearby temple passes through the crowd, his shaved head gleaming, his linen pristine. People move aside reverently. He carries a censer swinging from chains, its smoke curling through the heat like a living thing. The air is unclean, he declares. Avoid the river until the offerings are made. Historians still argue whether these early priests acted more like physicians or politicians, performing rituals that soothe the soul while doing nothing for the body. But here and now, their authority feels absolute. You trail behind him as he turns toward the temple district, drawn by curiosity and the cool shade beyond. The market fades, replaced by towering pylons painted with gods who look down in silent judgment. Incense thickens the air until it burns your throat. Inside, the floor glitters with offerings. Gold trinkets, baskets of grain, jars of scented oil. And everywhere, there are petitions for health. For my son's fever. One clay tablet reads, for my husband's breath. Another. A quiet desperation hides behind every line. You watch a healer, priest, grind herbs in a small stone bowl. His tools are simple: pestle, cloth, small copper knives. We make salves for the boils. He explains softly, from honey lotus and natron. It draws out the sickness. You nod, pretending to understand, though you know the truth. Honey helps, natron burns, lotus soothes. but none of it can stop smallpox. He notices your expression. You don't believe, he says, smiling faintly. No one does at first. But the gods demand effort, not outcome. There's a strange comfort in that. Outside, you follow the flow of people toward the public square. Two men argue near a well. One swears the water smells foul, the other insists it's blessed. The bucket sloshes over the edge, spreading muddy puddles under bare feet. You think about all the hands that touch that same rope, the same wood, the same water. You think about the boy who coughed by the well yesterday. It's everywhere now, invisible, persistent, riding on everything that makes this civilization thrive. You try to focus on beauty instead. A line of dancers moves through the square, their gold collars flashing, their wrists twirling ribbons. Drummers keep time, their rhythms ancient and hypnotic. The scene is mesmerizing. Egypt's heart beats strong, vibrant, defiant. But then, you notice the empty space behind them. The stalls that didn't open today. The laughter that's thinner than it should be. The city hides its sickness well, but it can't hide the fear. As the sun climbs higher, the heat becomes unbearable. You duck into a shaded alcove where a scribe sits cross-legged, fanning himself lazily. His reed brush moves across papyrus with deliberate grace. You ask what he's writing. Inventory of grain, he says, and lists of households. He hesitates. The temple asked for a count. How many still breathe? You feel the weight of those words more than the heat. Is it that bad? He shrugs. Some days it is, some days it isn't. The gods decide. You leave him to his tolleying, his brush whispering like an insect. Somewhere, a hawk screams overhead. Horus watching, silent and eternal. The afternoon drifts on slower now, the streets thin. Even the cats seem to nap less confidently, their ears twitching at every cough. A funeral procession winds past, slow and solemn. The mourners carry a wooden mask painted in gold, a sign of respect for the departed. But you notice the way one mourner holds a cloth to her mouth. The city still lives, still sings, still sells its wares. But the song has changed key. By dusk, you find yourself back at the river's edge. The sky is crimson, the kind of color that would make any painter curse for lack of words. You stand there watching boats drift lazily past, the sails like faded parchment against the horizon. Somewhere upriver, a voice begins to wail. A sharp, lonely sound that breaks into sobs. You turn away. The market's torches flicker to life, painting long shadows that stretch toward you like fingers. You realize you've survived another day, but barely. And tomorrow, you'll have to do it all again. The next morning, the city feels heavier. Not busier, not louder, just heavy. Like the air itself knows something's wrong. You step outside, squinting against the low sun, and the familiar hum of life hits differently today. The songs of boatmen, the ring of hammers from the mason's yard, the chatter of women pounding grain. Everything sounds cautious. Even the Nile seems to move more slowly, its waters thicker, darker, more secretive. You decide to walk south, toward the artisans' district, where tomb builders, sculptors, and scribes cluster near the limestone cliffs. It's a place of precision and pride, of hands that work for eternity. The workers here carve beauty into death, crafting tombs that whisper of immortality. The irony doesn't escape you, people terrified of dying, yet spending their lives preparing for it. As you pass a row of open courtyards, you hear the rhythmic tapping of chisels and smell the sharp tang of fresh-cut stone. Dust clouds rise like ghosts, catching in the sunbeams that filter through the scaffolding. A foreman yells something about deadlines. Apparently, even the afterlife comes with a schedule. One of the carvers waves you over, his arms caked in white powder. You knew. He asks, offering a water skin. You hesitate. He laughs softly. Don't worry. It's river water, but I boiled it. You take a cautious sip. It's warm, metallic, faintly sweet. "You look like you haven't seen much of Egypt yet," he says. "You want to see something that lasts longer than kings." He leads you into the tomb chamber they're working on. Inside, the light fades to gold. Every surface glows with painted scenes, fields of reeds, offerings of bread and beer, gods with the heads of falcons, jackals, and ibises. It's breathtaking and deeply unsettling. These walls promise eternal life, yet outside, real bodies are failing under an invisible plague. He points to a small section still wet with pigment. "See this." The image shows a priest purifying a body before burial, a jar in hand. "That's the canopic scene. Lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines go here," he explains. "We keep them safe for the gods." You ask if the people aren't afraid of the dead spreading illness. He shrugs. "The dead are pure. The living bring rot." Historians still argue whether ancient embalmers realized they were handling infectious corpses. Their rituals, natron drying, resin sealing, accidentally acted like primitive sterilization. You glance at a nearby table where someone is mixing resin, its scent sticky and sharp like sap. The worker hums quietly, unbothered by the flies gathering at his elbows. Outside again, the sun has climbed higher. The air feels grainy on your tongue, full of dust and rumor. You walk past a papyrus seller setting out fresh scrolls. His hands are long and stained green from the reeds. He smiles warily. "Bad time for business," he says. "People too busy dying to write." You pick up a scroll anyway, unrolling it slightly. It's a letter template for the afterlife, an offering list to ensure the gods remember your name. The seller nods knowingly. "You'll need one soon enough," he says, half joking, half serious. You keep walking. The streets twist into narrower lanes, walls closing in like the ribs of a beast. Laundry lines flap overhead, damp with Nile water and sweat. Somewhere, a child laughs, and the sound cuts through the tension for a heartbeat. Then you hear it a scream. Sharp, short, quickly silenced. You turn toward the sound and see a woman kneeling in front of a doorway. She's clutching a young boy, his body limp. Around them, neighbors stand at a distance, murmuring prayers, but not daring to step closer. The woman's voice cracks as she rocks him. "It's only fever," she insists. He will wake. He won't. You recognize the marks, raised pustules, small but spreading fast along his arms. Smallpox doesn't wait. It blooms. You move on, because what else can you do? You're not part of this world. You're only watching it unravel. By midday, you reach the Temple of Thoth, god of wisdom. The gates are carved with ibis feathers and moon symbols, the details so precise you could trace them blindfolded. Inside, scribes kneel before stone tablets, copying text line by line. The quiet is sacred, almost eerie. One scribe glances up at you. His eyes are rimmed with exhaustion. You seek knowledge, he whispers. Or comfort. You pause. Maybe both. He gestures to a papyrus beside him. Rows of careful hieroglyphs. Records of trade ships, he explains. They bring cedar from Byblos, copper from Sinai, and sometimes sickness. That catches your breath. You think the disease came by sea. He nods slowly. Everything comes by sea eventually. Historians still argue whether Egyptian epidemics were local or imported. But the trade routes between empires were veins of civilization and infection. You picture sailors coughing into the wind, dock workers unloading crates, rats scurrying between ropes. Each journey a gamble between wealth and ruin. The scribe dips his reed pen again. The pharaoh's court will deny it, he says. They always do. The gods protect the strong. You step back into sunlight, feeling the words settle in your stomach like stones. Later that afternoon, you wander through a row of workshops where papyrus sheets dry on racks, fluttering like pale leaves. Workers sing softly as they pound reeds, their voices rhythmic and haunting. One stops to wipe his brow and mutters, Better to work than wait. You ask, wait for what? He shrugs. The sickness, of course. It always comes. As the day stretches toward dusk, you find yourself back by the river. Barges glide past, laden with goods, alabaster jars, copper tools, bundles of grain. The trade that makes Egypt rich also carries its doom, a paradox painted in sunlight and water. Near the dock, a priest blesses the boats with oil. His chant rises over the lapping waves. May Ra guide your path and keep the air clean. The crowd bows, murmuring agreement. You spot a sailor scratching his arm raw, his skin blotched with small red spots. No one notices, or maybe they choose not to. You find a seat on a fallen column, watching the city breathe. Children chase goats, vendors count coins. Lovers steal moments in the shadows. Life refuses to stop, even as death walks openly among them. Night falls slowly. The western sky burns orange, then deepens into violet. Torches flicker along the streets, and the call of a distant flute drifts over the water. You think about all the hands that carved, traded, and prayed today. Hands that will never hold anything again by week's end. Somewhere in the darkness, a cough echoes. Just one. Then another. The city sleeps, but the sickness doesn't. You pull your shawl tighter, pretending it will protect you. It won't. Not from what's coming. The next morning comes without warning. No rooster call, no gentle sunlight. Just the heavy stillness of air, so thick it feels alive. You wake to the sound of distant arguing. A man yelling near the well, another shouting back about dirty water and angry gods. You already know where this is going. Egypt's lifeline, the great Nile, has turned into its most efficient killer. You step outside, blinking against the glare. The river glimmers beyond the rooftops, calm, perfect, the kind of beauty that tricks you into forgetting what hides in its depths. The streets are quieter today. Fewer traders, fewer voices. You see doors shuttered, windows veiled with linen. The city isn't dead yet, but it's holding its breath. You wander toward the water anyway. You can't help it. The Nile calls like it always has. Patient, ancient, indifferent. Along the bank, women kneel with clay jars, scooping water as their children splash nearby. Laundry floats on reeds, catching light like banners. It's domestic, even peaceful. Until you look closer. One of the women's hands is covered in blisters. She doesn't seem to notice. Or maybe she's pretending not to. A fisherman greets you with a wary smile. His net drips silver. Bad flood this year, he says. The river's mood is strange. Too many bodies floating downstream.
You freeze.
Bodies. He nods. Small ones. Sometimes the priests take them. Sometimes they don't. Historians still argue whether Egyptian sanitation practices helped or hindered them. Their baths, their perfumes, their belief in ritual purity. All signs of sophistication. Yet they poured waste into the same river that gave them life. You watch a line of men dragging refuse carts, tipping their contents into the water. Fish bones, animal guts, something darker. It's a cycle both sacred and suicidal. A priest nearby chants as the refuse hits the current. May hapi cleans what is unclean. He sprinkles herbs into the river, like a man trying to perfume a corpse. You keep walking. The heat builds, pressing down from above and rising from below. The mud bricks around you exhale the day's warmth. Even the cats look defeated, sprawled in narrow slivers of shade. You pass a small courtyard where a family eats breakfast. Bread, onions, dates. The youngest child sneezes. The mother scolds him gently, wiping his nose with a linen strip. She doesn't notice the rash beginning on his neck. You do. You almost say something, but then stop. What could you say? You'd sound insane. Hey, you might have a virus no one knows exists yet. Instead, you move on, past workshops where potters' wheels spin lazily, past weavers beating cloth in slow rhythm. Life continues in stubborn denial. That's the human gift, or curse, across every age. By noon, you reach the city's public baths. The stone pools shimmer invitingly, and for a moment, you think about jumping in. Then you see the scum floating on top. Oily, iridescent, buzzing with flies. Still, people bathe, laughing, gossiping. A man dunks his head, comes up grinning, and shakes the water from his hair like a dog.
"It keeps the fever away,"
he shouts. His friend slaps him on the back, agreeing wholeheartedly. You want to scream. But then, you remind yourself, germ theory won't exist for another 3,000 years. They don't know. They can't. The Egyptians believed disease came from imbalance. Bad air, angry gods, cosmic disharmony. So they prayed, purified, and perfumed. And somehow, sometimes, it worked. Honey and herbs healed wounds. Oils and natron preserved bodies. Their instincts saved lives even when their reasons didn't. You sit under a palm tree, watching life swirl around you. A young woman sells lotus flowers, her voice gentle but sharp with exhaustion. Her hands tremble as she arranges the petals. For purity, she tells a passing nobleman, place them near the bed. The smell pleases the gods. The noblewoman pays double. Desperation always inflates the market. You walk on, heading toward a shaded street lined with mud brick homes. A group of men argue outside one of them. One holds a clay jar close to his chest, shouting,
"It's in the water! I've seen it!"
Another shakes his head.
"Nonsense!"
The gods send fever through the air. Their debate grows heated, ridiculous, tragic. You realize you're watching the birth of every public health argument in history. A child tugs on one man's tunic, whispering. The man looks down, freezes, then slowly lifts the child's hand. Pustules, new, red, fresh. The argument dies. Silence spreads. Then panic. The man backs away, the others too. The boy begins to cry, confused by the sudden distance of people who love him. The crowd around them disperses like smoke. You can't watch anymore. You turn toward the river again. At the dock, traders load goods onto boats heading north. Spices, wine, linen, copper, all packed tight, ready for the markets of Memphis and beyond. The same boats will carry the disease upstream, hand-delivered by commerce itself. Civilization's veins. You overhear a sailor laughing with his crew. A rash. A little fever. The gods will sort it out. He scratches his arm and climbs aboard. The wind shifts, and suddenly the smell of rot drifts from somewhere nearby. You follow it to an alley where two men are covering a body with linen. Too many, one mutters. The temple can't keep up. They tie the shroud, whisper a prayer, and move on. You glance up. The vultures already circle, patient and practiced. By evening, the Nile looks almost serene again. You sit on the bank, staring at your reflection rippling in the water. Behind you, the city exhales the heat of the day. Fires crackle, people murmur, drums thud faintly in the distance. It's beautiful. It's horrifying. You scoop a handful of river water and let it run through your fingers. For a brief, foolish second, it feels clean. Then you notice the faint sheen of oil on your skin. You wipe it away. The smell lingers. The sun sinks low, painting everything gold and blood, red. The world feels fragile, suspended between two breaths. And somewhere, unseen, the virus multiplies. Quietly, efficiently, without mercy. You look up at the horizon and realize something awful. This isn't just one bad day in Egypt's long history. This is a pattern, ancient as the river itself. Life rises, thrives, and rots. Empires bloom and blister. And you, standing in the middle of it, are just another body waiting to be counted. You wake in the middle of the night, throat dry as the desert itself. The sound that wakes you isn't human. It's the steady hiss of the Nile's water, brushing against the embankments, rhythmic and cold like a whispering serpent. Moonlight spills through the cracks of your reed. Woven window, silver and soft, but your chest feels tight. You've been breathing dust all day, and now the air tastes of iron and ash. You rise quietly and step outside. The city sleeps, or pretends to. The alleys stretch empty, except for a few cats prowling between jars and baskets. Smoke hangs in thin layers above rooftops, curling from small fires that still burn low. You move slowly, careful not to disturb the silence, because in this hour, silence feels alive. It presses against your ears. Every footstep echoes louder than it should. Then you see them. A group of priests walking in single file toward the riverbank. They carry oil lamps, their light small and trembling in the wind. One priest holds a bronze bowl, another carries palm branches dipped in resin. They chant low, guttural tones that vibrate in the air. You follow them at a distance, staying in the shadows. When they reach the edge of the Nile, they stop and kneel. The lead priest dips his fingers into the water, lifts them to his forehead, and whispers a prayer to Hapi, the god of the river. Grant us your mercy. Cleans what is corrupted. He pours oil into the water, and it spreads like liquid fire across the surface, the reflection dancing orange and gold under the moonlight. The smell of burning resin fills your nose. You realize this isn't a simple offering. It's an exorcism. The Egyptians believed that when sickness spreads through a community, the Nile itself must be angry. Spirits, they say, cling to the water, and so the priests burn them away. But all you see is pollution layered upon pollution. The oil slick widens, the reflection distorts, and fish leap to the surface gasping for air. One of the younger priests stumbles, clutching his stomach. The head priest steadies him, murmuring something about the gods testing faith. You know better. You've seen the same sickness crawl through the marketplace these past days. Fever, rash, blisters, exhaustion. And you know it isn't divine punishment. It's something smaller, invisible, microscopic. But you can't tell them that. You turn away as the chanting grows louder. Behind you, the city breathes uneasily. When dawn breaks, you return to the streets, and the city has changed. The air feels heavier. People move slower, speaking in whispers. You notice black flags hanging outside some houses. A quiet signal that someone inside has died. The market, once chaotic and full of shouting, is now subdued. Fewer stalls, fewer traders. Even the animals seem cautious, their movements restrained, as if they can sense what's coming. You pass a butcher's stall where a man sits motionless beside a half-carved goat. His eyes are open, unfocused. You think he's asleep, until you see the flies gathering at the corner of his lips. The woman beside him, perhaps his wife, doesn't scream. She just pulls a cloth over his face and keeps cutting the meat. Routine doesn't die easily. Further down the street, a child chases a hoop with a stick, laughing. His laughter rings sharp, beautiful, and brief. A woman nearby scolds him to come inside, her voice cracking with something deeper than annoyance. She's afraid, and the boy doesn't understand why. You do. You've seen the red marks forming at the base of his neck. A group of soldiers marches by, their armor clinking in the sunlight. They've been sent to keep order, though no one dares look them in the eye. The captain stops at a corner where two men argue, one accusing the other of poisoning a well. The soldiers separate them with the blunt ends of their spears.
Enough!
The captain barks. The pharaoh's temple is handling it. His tone is confident, but his face isn't. Sweat drips down his jaw. His eyes flick toward the Nile. That night, you find yourself drawn back to the riverbank. Fires burn along the water's edge. Funeral pyres. The smell of burning flesh mixes with frankincense. Men stand in lines, silent, waiting for their turn to pass bodies, wrapped in linen to the priests. Each bundle is carried with care, but speed. No one lingers long enough to grieve. A mother clutches her dead child, refusing to let go. Two priests try to take the body, but she fights them, screaming curses that cut through the chanting. The priests relent for a moment, and she cradles the child tighter, rocking back and forth. Her sobs dissolve into the sound of the river. Eventually, she lays him on the pyre herself, her face blank, her hands trembling. You stand there, unable to move. You want to comfort her, but your presence would mean nothing here. You're an intruder in time, a ghost out of place. All you can do is watch history unfold. Raw, unfiltered, brutal. When the flames rise, their reflections twist across the water, turning the Nile into a mirror of fire. It's strangely beautiful. That thin line between reverence and horror, between devotion and desperation. You understand now why ancient Egypt feels both immortal and doomed. They loved their gods so fiercely they burned themselves alive trying to please them. By morning, the fires have gone cold. The city reeks of ash and sweat. You wander through the outer districts, where the poor live close together in mud brick clusters. Here, the sickness thrives. No physicians, no priests, no offerings. Just families huddled in corners, whispering prayers that sound like sighs. You see one man carving small amulets from bone, selling them as charms against the invisible curse. People buy them anyway. Not because they believe, but because belief is cheaper than despair. You stop at a small shrine, its wall painted with fading hieroglyphs. Offerings of bread and beer sit rotting on the altar. A girl kneels before it, her head shaved, her body thin as a reed. She murmurs to Isis, begging for her mother's recovery. Her voice is hoarse, her eyes hollow. You wish you could tell her the truth. That no goddess is coming. But maybe she already knows, and still she prays, because that's all anyone can do. The sun climbs higher. You feel your skin tighten, cracked from heat and thirst. You've been here only a few days, yet it feels like a lifetime. Every moment stretches, thick with dread. You start to notice the little things. How the flies have multiplied, how the river smells sweeter, almost metallic. Decay, disguised as divinity. At noon, you find shade beneath a sycamore fig tree. A group of children sit nearby, sharing figs and laughing weakly. One of them asks you if you're a traveler from the north. You nod. The north is clean, he says hopefully. They say no sickness there. You want to tell him that's a lie. The boats, the traders, the servants have already carried it upriver, but you stay silent. Hope, even false hope, is medicine of its own kind. A merchant passes by dragging a cart of herbs and spices.
He shouts, "Cinnamon! Clove! Myrrh!"
Keeps the fever away. You almost smile. Somewhere, thousands of years later, people will still say the same about garlic, salt, or vinegar. Humanity doesn't change. Just the flavor of its superstition. As the heat fades, you head toward the temple district again. The sandstone walls glow orange in the setting sun, covered in carvings of gods with animal heads. Jackal, falcon, ibis. Each symbolizing a force both benevolent and cruel. Inside the great hall, priests perform rituals over bowls of incense. The air thickens with smoke and chanting. You catch fragments of their words. The river must be appeased. The air must be cleansed. They sprinkle natron and oils on burning coals. The crackle echoes like rain on stone. Then you hear something new. The sound of coughing. Rough, persistent, human. You glance at the acolytes kneeling near the altar. One coughs into his sleeve, tries to hide it. Another sways on his knees. The disease has reached even here, into the holiest place in the city. You realize then that no wall, no prayer, no gold can protect anyone. You step back into the dusk. The sky above the city burns red, like an open wound. The smell of the river clings to you, sweet and rotten. Somewhere, a drum starts beating, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. You follow the sound through the alleys, until you reach a courtyard filled with people. Dancers whirl around a fire, their bodies painted with ash. They sing to Sekhmet, goddess of plague and healing, begging her to show mercy. You remember reading once that the Egyptians believed Sekhmet's rage caused epidemics, but that her compassion could cure them. To calm her, People would dance, drink, and sing through the night, hoping she'd forget her anger by morning. It's both tragic and beautiful. This faith that destruction can be undone by joy. You join the edge of the crowd. The rhythm pulls you in, your feet tapping unconsciously. The dancers move like shadows, hair flying, hands lifted to the sky. Their voices rise together, a chorus of defiance. For the first time since arriving, you feel something like hope, fragile, irrational, but real. Because even in a dying city, humans still find ways to celebrate being alive. The dance continues until dawn. One by one, people collapse from exhaustion, their laughter fading into sleep. When the first light touches the horizon, you look toward the Nile again. The mist glows gold. Birds skim the surface. It looks peaceful, almost innocent, as if the river itself is unaware of the chaos it has unleashed. But you know better. You've seen how quickly life turns to death here, how beauty masks decay. The Nile gives, the Nile takes, and the people love it anyway. Maybe that's the real secret of ancient Egypt. Not its monuments or gods, but its resilience. To live every day on the edge of disaster and still find meaning. You breathe deeply, the air thick with incense and smoke. You feel fever rising in your own body now, a dull ache in your limbs, a tremor beneath your skin. Maybe you drank the wrong water. Maybe you touched the wrong door. It doesn't matter. The story has already decided your fate. You look at the sunrise one last time, and the thought hits you, this is how every civilization ends. Not in fire or conquest, but in silence, denial, and the slow spread of something no one can see. You turn from the river and walk back into the waking city, unsure whether you're witnessing its dawn or its dusk. The morning smells like wet clay and smoke, the kind that clings to your tongue long after you've breathed it in. You wake to the sound of shouting outside. Not the usual street market noise, but something sharper, desperate. When you step outside, the alley is already filled with people clutching their mouths, whispering behind linen veils. You follow the sound to the central square. There, a crowd gathers around a man kneeling in the dust. His back arches in pain, his body trembling like a string pulled too tight. His skin glistens with sweat, and across his chest and arms, you see it, small, raised blisters. Hundreds of them, shining like pearls under the morning sun. The crowd murmurs. Someone spits on the ground and backs away. Another woman crosses herself in the ancient way, whispering to Isis for protection. The man's breathing grows shallow, his fingers clawing at his own skin, as though trying to peel the sickness off. A priest arrives, robes flaring, carrying a staff topped with a bronze ankh. "Step back," he commands. The people obey instantly. He kneels beside the man, examines the lesions, then rises with grim certainty. The mark of the curse, he declares. A punishment for sins unspoken. You know better. This isn't divine punishment. It's the first true case of smallpox the city has seen in years. And yet, for them, the language of gods is the only explanation that fits. You watch as the priest sprinkles natron over the man's body. The powder mixes with sweat, forming a paste that does nothing but sting. The man cries out. Someone in the crowd retches. The priest orders the body carried to the edge of the city. Not for healing, but for quarantine. The onlookers disperse like shadows. A mother clutches her child tighter as you pass. Her eyes meet yours for a moment, wide and terrified. She's already calculating the distance between her home and the infected man. By noon, word has spread through every street. The Hariva curse, they're calling it. The Nile has turned its face away. Every sneeze, every cough becomes a scandal. Merchants begin closing stalls. Fishermen refuse to cast nets. You hear that a caravan from the south has been turned away at the gates. Too risky to let new bodies in. Still, some corners of the city refuse to surrender to fear. In the shade of a stone arch, you find two scribes arguing over clay tablets. One insists the outbreak began near the docks, where foreign traders from Nubia unload their goods. The other says it came from the northern farms, carried by migrating workers. Historians still argue whether the first outbreak came by boat or by soil. You think to yourself, almost smiling at the strange déjà vu. Thousands of years later, people will still argue about the origin of every plague. You continue toward the docks. The air grows hotter, heavier. The smell hits you first, rotten stagnant water, mixed with the sweetness of spilled dates. The workers move slower here, covering their mouths with scraps of cloth. You see the same rash on one of them, a young man hauling amphorae of oil. His forearms are covered in tiny, hard pustules. He notices your stare, pulls down his sleeve, and whispers, "Don't tell the overseer." His voice is ragged. He finishes his shift anyway, because in this city, hunger still outruns fear. You pass a boat tied loosely to the pier. Its hull bears a painted falcon, symbol of Horus, protector of kings. But the deck is empty. Only a few dried stains mark where sailors once stood. A child nearby tells you the captain died 2 nights ago, face covered in moons. The crew burned him at sea. You leave the docks, the water behind you rippling like liquid glass. Every step you take feels heavier. You can almost sense the sickness in the air now, invisible, patient, drifting through the city like dust. At the temple of Sekhmet, the goddess of plague, priests gather offerings. The floor is littered with petals and spilled milk. A large statue of the lion, headed goddess towers above them, eyes painted bright red. Worshippers kneel, offering meat and incense. The priest's chants echo through the hall. She who brings the fire, she who cools it again. You watch as a young girl approaches the altar. Clutching a small wooden doll, she whispers something and sets it down at Sekhmet's feet. Her hands tremble. You realize she's not praying for herself, but for someone already gone. Outside the temple, the sky has turned a bruised yellow, hazy with dust. The streets have grown quiet. Doors are shuttered, markets closed. The city's heartbeat slows to a nervous flutter. You hear the faint clatter of sandals behind you. A healer, one of the few brave enough to walk openly. He carries a satchel of herbs, his tunic stained dark with sweat. He pauses near a doorway, kneels, and presses his palm against a man's forehead. The patient's skin is covered in scabs. The healer murmurs something about balm of sycamore, crushes a handful of green leaves, and rubs them into a paste. The smell is sharp, almost medicinal, but you know it's useless. Still, there's something profoundly human about his persistence. He looks exhausted, eyes rimmed red, but he moves on to the next house without hesitation. You follow him for a while, watching. He stops at a corner to rest. It's in the air, he mutters to no one. Or the water, maybe both. He stares at his hands. You can see faint blisters forming on his wrists. He sighs, ties his satchel tighter, and keeps walking. As evening falls, the Nile glows orange beneath the setting sun. The city, though weakened, still breathes. Fires burn in hearths, children cry, priests chant. But you can feel the tension under every sound, like a bowstring drawn too tight. Then the drums begin. You hear them first from the western quarter. Deep, resonant beats rolling through the air. People emerge from their houses, curious, afraid. The sound grows louder, more urgent. You follow the crowd uphill to the plaza outside the temple of Ra. There, soldiers stand guard as priests drag carts of bodies wrapped in linen. Each body is dusted with natron and smeared with honey, a desperate attempt to preserve them until proper burial. But there are too many. The line of dead stretches across the square like a pale river. A priest announces that the pharaoh has ordered purification fires. The bodies will be burned at sundown to cleanse the air. The soldiers pour oil into massive clay pits. Someone lights a torch. You flinch as the flames roar to life. The heat hits your face like a slap. The smell is unbearable. Flesh, fabric oil, and incense all blending into something sickly sweet. People cover their faces, some praying, others vomiting. A woman beside you whispers, "Even Ra can't watch this." When the fires die down, only silence remains. The soldiers collect the ashes in jars, marking them with hieroglyphs for purity. The priests chant again, thanking the gods for their mercy. But mercy feels far away tonight. You walk home under a sky of cold stars. The city is dark, save for scattered torches flickering in doorways. Somewhere, you hear a baby crying, then nothing. The Nile flows on, indifferent, carrying bits of ash downstream. You pause on a bridge and lean against the stone railing. The air is cool now, but your skin still feels feverish. You imagine the invisible particles of disease drifting over the water, landing on your clothes, your hair. You picture how quickly it spreads. One cough, one touch, one shared breath. You think of the man in the square, the healer, the priest, the mother by the pyre. All of them bound by the same invisible thread, tugged by the same cruel hand. It occurs to you that no civilization, no matter how grand, is built to survive what it cannot see. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of burnt honey. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere deep within the city, another voice begins to cough. You realize the epidemic isn't coming. It's already here, and as the first true night of fear settles over ancient Egypt, you finally understand why you wouldn't last even 24 hours. Because survival here isn't just about avoiding sickness, it's about enduring the unbearable. The loss, the silence, the waiting for the next knock at the door that never comes from the living. The Nile glimmers beneath you, beautiful and cruel. Its waters promise life but carry death. And still, the people will worship it tomorrow. You stay there a long time, watching the reflection of stars tremble across the surface, until the sounds of the city fade into the hush of the river. The same hush that greeted the first body this morning. It's the sound of ancient Egypt breathing out softly, as if too tired to go on. You wake to the sound of bells. Not the kind that mark celebration, but those that toll for danger. Low, deliberate, echoing through the dawn haze. They ring from the temple towers, their bronze throats summoning both the living and the frightened. It's the signal the city hoped never to hear quarantine. You step outside and the world feels different. The usual buzz of the market has vanished. Doors are barred, windows shuttered. Strips of linen hang across doorways marked with ochre, red for the infected, blue for the dead. The streets smell of vinegar, smoke, and fear. A crier walks ahead of two soldiers, shouting orders.
No one leaves the quarter!
Food will be brought once daily.
Stay inside! Pray for Pharaoh's mercy!
His voice cracks halfway through the proclamation. You can tell he doesn't believe what he's saying. You move slowly, past silent doorways and empty courtyards. The only sounds now are the flap of vultures and the whisper of wind through palm trees. The city of the living has become a waiting room for death. At the edge of the street, a makeshift barrier of woven reeds and clay jars blocks passage. Two guards stand watch. They look wary, sunburned, and nervous. One of them coughs into his hand and quickly wipes it on his tunic, pretending it didn't happen. "Can I pass?" you ask, though your voice barely rises above a whisper. He shakes his head. Orders from the temple. No entry, no exit. Until the goddess Wrath passes. You nod and turn back, but his eyes linger on you. Maybe he's wondering who you are. A traveler caught in the wrong time, the wrong century. Or maybe he's wondering whether you'll survive the night. Farther down the alley, you find a group of women boiling water in large bronze pots. The steam fogs the air, thick with the scent of herbs. Juniper, garlic, myrrh. They're healers, working not for gold but for hope. One of them, an older woman with silver, threaded braids, looks up and beckons you closer. You've seen it, haven't you? She says, her eyes sharp. The spots. The fever. You nod, she sighs. The priests think prayer will cure it. The soldiers think fire will. But the gods. She stirs the pot slowly. The gods are only watching. You help her for a while, carrying jars of oil, grinding leaves into powder. The rhythm of her work is strangely soothing, even as the moans of the sick echo from nearby houses. She tells you the temples are overrun, patients lying in corridors, priests too afraid to touch them. Some have fled entirely. Historians still argue whether the ancient quarantines were effective. You murmur, half to yourself. She glances at you, puzzled by the phrasing, then shrugs. Maybe it's not about being effective, she says. Maybe it's about pretending we have control. Her words settle deep inside you, heavier than the heat. By midday, the sun feels merciless. You walk toward the upper terraces, where the pharaoh's courtiers live. There, the walls gleam white and the air smells faintly of lotus and incense. But even here, the silence has teeth. Servants move quickly, eyes lowered, carrying trays of perfumed oil. Every household now performs its own little rituals of cleansing, burning cedar, bathing in milk, whispering prayers over bowls of water. You pass a small courtyard where a nobleman sits beneath a canopy, sweating profusely. His wife fans him, her own hands shaking. His arms are covered in bandages. A physician kneels nearby, chanting softly as he presses a stone amulet to the man's forehead. Sekhmet, cool the fire. Sekhmet, spare this house. The nobleman gasps and turns away. You see the marks beneath the linen. Pustules burst open, raw, glistening. The physician flinches but keeps chanting, his face pale. You leave before the smell drives you out. Beyond the terraces, you find the quarantine huts. These were once workers' shelters, but now they're filled with the dying. Guards stand at a distance, spears crossed, forbidding entry. But through the cracks in the reed walls, you glimpse faces, children curled beside their mothers, men whispering prayers into the dirt. A small boy crawls to the doorway, reaching for light. His lips move silently water. One of the guards hesitates, then tosses him a gourd. The boy drinks greedily, spilling most of it down his neck. When he looks up, his eyes meet yours, bright, feverish, impossibly alive. Then someone inside calls his name, and he vanishes back into the shadows. You walk on, heart heavy. In the late afternoon, the priests march through the streets again. They carry censers filled with burning resin, swinging them to purify the air. The smoke coils around them, thick and sweet. You hear snippets of prayer. May Ra burn the sickness away. May Isis breathe healing winds. Repeated like a spell against the inevitable. At every corner, they mark the walls with hieroglyphs for life, as if ink could stop a virus. You stop to watch as one priest paints the symbol over a doorway, his hand trembling. The family inside watches through the crack, their faces pale. When he finishes, he steps back and whispers to you, "The gods hear us. They must." You almost tell him the truth, that faith doesn't stop contagion, that quarantine isn't mercy but mathematics. But what good would it do? Sometimes belief is the last medicine left. That night, the city glows red under the firelight. You climb to the rooftops for air, the wind hot against your face. From up here, the Nile gleams like a dark mirror. Small boats drift silently, carrying food, water, and, unknowingly, the disease itself. You spot the temple of Sekhmet across the water. Its torches still burn, but the chants have changed. No longer prayers, now wails. You can almost feel the despair pulsing through the night. A cat slinks across the rooftop near you, its fur glinting gold. Cats here are sacred, guardians of the divine household. You remember hearing once that some believed they could ward off evil spirits. You reach out to it, and it doesn't run. It curls near your feet, purring softly. Somehow, that simple sound, steady, rhythmic, alive, cuts through the fear. Below, a bell rings again, one long drawn-out note. It means another quarter has been sealed. By dawn, the city is divided by invisible lines. Districts separated. Families split, neighbors turn strangers. Soldiers patrol the alleys, burning refuse, collecting the dead. The Nile, once the lifeblood of Egypt, has become a moat of isolation. And yet, life continues. Bakers still knead dough. Potters still spin clay. Children still laugh. Faintly, cautiously. As though laughter itself might anger the gods. You wander toward the western necropolis, where the sand stretches endless and white. Rows of tombs lie half, buried in dust, their carvings eroded by time. Here, away from the city, silence reigns. You can hear your heartbeat again. A small group of workers digs shallow graves nearby. No priests, no ceremony, just efficiency. Bodies wrapped in linen, stacked in quiet layers. One man wipes sweat from his brow and mutters, "We bury the old gods now, too." It's a strange thought. How faith bends under the weight of disease. For every priest still chanting in the temples, there are others burning incense at home, whispering to new gods they've invented from fear and desperation. You sit for a while on a stone ledge, watching the sand drift. The air shimmers with heat. Somewhere beyond the dunes, jackals call. The wind tastes of salt and memory. You wonder if the pharaoh himself is safe behind his palace walls, if he's even been told how bad it's become. Power has a way of sealing its own quarantine. By nightfall, the drums begin again, slower now, heavier. The sound vibrates through your bones. Fires rise along the riverbanks. You see figures dancing again, just as before, though fewer this time. Their movements are slower, warier. Still, they dance. You descend to join them. A woman passes you a clay cup of beer, smiling faintly. Her hands are trembling. "We dance," she says. So Sekhmet sleeps. And so you do. You move to the rhythm, letting the drums drown your thoughts. Around you, the city sways like a candle flame. Fragile but unextinguished. You realize something as you move. The people here aren't merely afraid of dying. They're afraid of being forgotten. Every dance, every chant, every whispered prayer is a rebellion against erasure. When the drums fade and the fires die, the silence that follows feels sacred. The stars above shimmer, their reflections trembling in the Nile below. You look out at the river one last time before dawn, and for a brief, impossible moment, you imagine it cleansed, not of disease, but of despair. But when the sun rises, the bells toll again. The sickness has crossed another wall. The smell hits you first, not rot, not exactly, but a blend of incense, herbs, and something sour that reminds you faintly of sweat soaked into linen. You're standing before an ancient Egyptian healing house. What some might call a proto-hospital. It's both sacred and pragmatic, half temple and half sick ward, guarded by falcon statues and the low murmur of chanting priests. You've been wandering too long under the desert sun, dizzy from thirst and a slight fever that started as a scratch in your throat. Now, you're about to learn what medical care means in a civilization built on divine order and sand. A robed scribe greets you, his eyes darting toward the lesion on your arm. He doesn't flinch, though. He's seen worse. "Ra's light burns strong today," he says, which might mean anything from "welcome" to "you look contagious." He scribbles a quick line of hieratic on a piece of papyrus. Not your name, because that's not how they track patients, but a note about your symptoms, and the God to whom your case will be dedicated. Each illness is a divine test, and the gods have their own paperwork. You're led inside. The building is dim, its walls painted with images of Horus and Thoth, gods of healing and wisdom. In a corner, two apprentices grind herbs in shallow bowls, muttering measurements under their breath. The clatter of copper instruments blends with the rustle of linen bandages. Someone moans. Somewhere else, someone prays. Ancient Egyptian medicine wasn't entirely superstition, though, to be fair, a fair bit of it was. The physicians, known as Snow, were trained professionals, often literate, sometimes attached to temples. Their knowledge came from centuries of trial and error, codified into medical papyri like the Ebers Papyrus, which described hundreds of ailments and treatments. Some of it worked honey as an antibacterial agent, moldy bread as a crude antibiotic long before penicillin's invention. Others, well, let's just say crocodile dung and beer weren't exactly miracle cures. You sit beside a basin filled with cool Nile water. A healer dips a cloth in it and presses it against your arm. It must be drawn out, he says, glancing toward a shelf of neatly organized jars. Natron, crushed myrrh, powdered lapis lazuli. They believed colors themselves carried healing power. Blue symbolized protection and regeneration. Green was life. You almost laugh, but then again, we still swallow color, coded pills, and trust the chemistry inside without fully understanding it. Maybe belief has always been half the cure. He asks you to lie back. You try not to stare at the patient beside you. A child, breathing shallowly, her skin marked by small, pitted blisters. The sight makes your stomach twist. You've seen this pattern before. It's the same rash that burned through the village market days ago. Smallpox doesn't care about class or creed. It spreads silently, swiftly, invisibly. A divine wind no amulet can block. The healer mixes a paste, honey, resin, and something bitter you can't identify, and applies it to your wound. The gods test the strong, he murmurs. They do not wish for your death, only your offering. You nod weakly. It's not comfort you need, but maybe a little faith helps. Nearby, a priest in leopard skin blesses each patient with a small chant. The words rise and fall like the Nile's tide. They're meant to drive out malevolent spirits, the Aku, who, according to belief, cause disease by invading the body. Historians still argue whether this dual system of spiritual and practical medicine helped or hindered survival. On one hand, it encouraged cleanliness and ritual care. On the other, it made germ theory wait a few thousand years. You're asked to drink something that tastes like old onions soaked in vinegar. It burns your throat, but not unpleasantly. It's laced with garlic, known for its antiseptic qualities. That's the thing half there. Magic. Potions actually worked, just not for the reasons they thought. The fever settles slightly, and you drift into a haze. When you wake, the light has changed. The sick room glows with amber dusk. The scribe is back, muttering over tablets of notes. You overhear him discussing mortality numbers. There's no denying it now. This outbreak isn't isolated. Villages upstream have closed their gates. Couriers have been ordered to avoid large gatherings. It's the ancient equivalent of a lockdown. You're moved to another part of the temple, a quieter chamber for recovery. But the line between treatment and quarantine is thin. You see others being carried in, their eyes glazed, their faces pocked. The priests burn myrrh continuously now, hoping the smoke will purify the air. You cough and wonder whether it's working, or just making everything smell like an incense shop gone wrong. At night, when the murmuring fades and only the river's hum remains, you overhear the healers arguing in hushed tones. One insists that the disease comes from impure water, another swears it's carried by wind spirits. The youngest among them says, "It spreads from touch." They silence him. The idea of human transmission is too radical, too terrifying. But deep down, you suspect he's right. You dream of floating above the city, of seeing the Nile's black ribbon cutting through gold sand, of watching its people huddle together in homes, praying, sweating, whispering the names of gods they hope are listening. Even in sleep, you can feel the fever tightening around you like a linen shroud. The next morning, you're weaker. The healer checks your pulse, not by counting beats, but by observing rhythm and warmth. It moves unevenly, he says, frowning. Perhaps your heart is at war with your stomach. You manage a crooked smile. Always has been, you whisper, trying to keep the mood light. Humor still counts as medicine, even here. He leaves a clay amulet by your bedside, carved with the eye of Horus. It's meant to protect against harm and evil. But its real function might just be to remind you that someone cares enough to try. You run your thumb over its smooth edge and notice it's slightly warm. Maybe from his hand, maybe from faith. Later, you're visited by a noblewoman servant who brings offerings: bread, onions, a small jug of beer. The sick room becomes a crossroads of humanity. Slaves, merchants, priests, and children all gathered in equal vulnerability. Disease flattens hierarchy faster than any decree. For once, you realize, everyone's just another fragile body trying to survive the same invisible storm. Still, the priests keep order. They chant, they clean, they record names of the lost. The temple's outer courtyard fills with clay tablets, marked with prayers for the dead. The healers wrap bodies in linen and sprinkle them with natron. Return them to Mart. One whispers. Restore balance to the world. It's heartbreaking, but oddly serene. Death isn't hidden here. It's woven into daily rhythm. People mourn and move on in the same breath. That, perhaps, is why their civilization endured so long. They accepted fragility as a fact, not a flaw. By the time you're strong enough to stand again, you've learned the rhythm of recovery. Morning baths in Nile water, herbal paste twice daily, a short prayer before eating. You begin to feel better. But you also sense something larger shifting. A collective fear settling into routine. Egypt's healers have seen plagues before, but none like this. Smallpox leaves survivors scarred, its victims buried, and its memory carved into every family story. You step outside the temple one evening. The sun drops behind the western hills, gilding everything in red, gold haze. From here you can see smoke curling from funerary pyres along the riverbank. A row of priests chant by torchlight. A group of children, recovered but pockmarked, laugh softly as they chase a hoop down the road. Life, as always, limps onward. You realize something profound. Medicine here isn't about erasing death. It's about balancing it, living beside it, respecting its rhythm. And in that quiet acceptance, there's a strange kind of peace. As you leave the temple courtyard, the healer who first treated you nods. Ra has given you another sunrise, he says simply. You thank him, though you know the gratitude belongs equally to the herbs, the prayers, and pure chants. That night, as you rest near the river, you hear distant drumming, a ritual for protection. The sound ripples across the water, blending with the croak of frogs and the sigh of palm fronds. You can't tell if it's meant to drive away disease or invite strength, but either way, it's hypnotic. You close your eyes, half smiling. The fever might return, the scars might stay, but for now you're alive. You've tasted the honey of their medicine and the ash of their fear, and somehow both flavors feel eternal. Tomorrow, the Nile will rise again, washing over the temples, the markets, and the graves alike. It always does. Morning light spills across the mud-brick alleys, painting them in pale gold and dust. You wake to the sound of laughter, light, quick, infectious. Children dart past your doorway, barefoot, their giggles echoing between the walls. For a fleeting second, it almost feels like the city has forgotten sickness. But as you watch closely, you see a mother wipe her child's forehead, checking for fever. The joy is thin, careful, held together by hope. You follow the children toward the edge of the square. Their play area is little more than a patch of packed earth, with a few scattered stones marking imaginary borders. One boy rolls a wooden hoop made from a broken cart wheel, while another swings a stick like a sword. It's innocent and ordinary. and terrifying once you realize how close they are, how easily the same laughter can spread more than joy. You sit on a fallen block of limestone and watch as one child sneezes, the others pausing for only a moment before resuming the game. Ancient Egypt had no concept of germs, no hand-washing before eating dates from shared baskets. Children hugged freely, drank from the same cup, shared honey cakes with sticky fingers. In a world where disease traveled through droplets and touch, their closeness was both beautiful and deadly. The parents hover nearby, pretending not to worry. You can tell they're keeping a quiet tally. Who's coughing? Whose rash hasn't faded? Who's missing today? It's the kind of counting only parents understand. You wander farther, passing a school courtyard where a scribe, in training, drills boys in hieroglyphs. The scratching of reed pens fills the air. Education here is a privilege, but not a shelter. Even in the house of life, as they call it, disease finds its way in. The young student sneezes onto his papyrus, smears the ink, and earns a soft reprimand. You wonder how many scrolls carry traces of contagion alongside divine words. The teacher, a patient man with sun, darkened skin, explains a proverb as you listen from the shade. Knowledge is the best medicine for the soul. You almost laugh. He means it metaphorically, but in this era, ignorance can literally kill you. Later, you visit a family home, simple, warm, walls coated in lime to reflect light. The family welcomes you, though they keep a slight distance, polite but cautious. The mother offers you lentil stew, the father, a craftsman, proudly shows his newly carved amulet of Bez, the dwarf god of protection. He guards our children, the man says. You note the charm's worn edges, evidence of constant touch. In a time without vaccines, protection is carved in clay, whispered in prayer, and held in trembling hands. You ask if their children are well. The mother hesitates. The little one, she says softly, has not eaten much. You follow her gaze to a toddler sitting by the doorway, eyes half-lidded, skin blotched with early lesions. She rocks him gently, singing a lullaby older than pyramids. It's a haunting tune about rebirth, about how the sun god Ra dies each night and rises each dawn. She sings as though willing her child to do the same. You want to help, but what could you offer? The healers are overwhelmed, temples crowded. So you do the only thing you can. You sit beside her listening. Sometimes bearing witness is the only medicine left. Outside, the older children's laughter fades. One boy begins to cough. A dry, hacking sound that draws looks but no words. People don't name it anymore. They just know. Naming gives it power. The father stands and gathers his tools, muttering that work must go on. He's carving charms for a merchant traveling south. They'll pay well for these, he says, but his eyes betray worry. Trade has slowed. Fear travels faster than boats. You step outside as the afternoon heat settles. The city hums. A strange blend of denial and endurance. You notice how the rhythm of life bends, but never breaks. Bakers still bake. Scribes still write. Lovers still meet under date palms. The smallpox hasn't stopped Egypt's heart. It's just changed its beat. Children, though. Children are the mirrors of that change. You watch one little girl offer a flower to a sick friend. She places it beside his sleeping mat, careful not to touch. It's a tiny act of empathy, maybe the only safe kind left. You think of how often care and contagion come hand in hand, and how even ancient hearts knew that balance. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian children were considered fully human in the modern sense. Some claim they were viewed more as extensions of their families, valuable yet replaceable. But as you look around, you see no evidence of emotional detachment. Parents weep. They pray. They barter everything they own for medicine or a priest's blessing. Grief, it turns out, doesn't need modernity to be real. Later that evening, you join a group of villagers watching the sunset over the Nile. The light turns the river to liquid gold, the same hue as the death masks you once saw in a tomb. A woman beside you murmurs, "Ra carries our sorrows west, so we may wake lighter." You nod. Maybe that's what every sunset has been saying since the dawn of time. A small boy tugs at your sleeve, holding up a clay doll. "She's sick," he says seriously. "But I gave her honey, so she'll be fine." You smile. He doesn't know it, but he's reenacting thousands of years of human trial and error. The belief that care itself can cure. And in a way, maybe it can. Night falls, and the air cools. The city quiets except for the low sound of crickets and the occasional distant cry of a grieving parent. You sit by the riverbank again, where reeds sway and frogs croak lazily. The Nile smells like silt and life and secrets. Somewhere upstream, more cases will appear. Downstream, others will vanish into memory. You think of those children's laughter, still echoing faintly. It reminds you that even in plague, joy finds cracks to slip through. Maybe survival isn't about health alone. It's about remembering how to play, even when the world hurts. Before sleep claims you, you imagine what this city might look like centuries from now. Its ruins buried in sand. Its stories guessed at by future eyes. Will they know these children existed? That they ran and laughed and coughed under the same sun? You hope so. Because every civilization, even one as mighty as Egypt, is held together by the fragile breath of its youngest souls. And tonight, under the whispering stars, that breath continues. By dawn, the river smells different. The fresh sweetness of early water is laced with pitch, fish oil, and something faintly metallic. The scent of cargo preparing to travel. Barges and reed boats line the embankment, their sails unfurled like pale wings. The fever has ebbed for now, but you can already feel a different kind of movement in the air. Not illness spreading from coughs, but trade carrying unseen passengers far beyond the city walls. You follow a group of merchants loading amphorae of beer, baskets of grain, and bundles of linen onto a wide river barge. The air hums with shouts, laughter, and the scrape of ropes on wood. A bald man with a tattoo of Anubis across his arm catches your eye. "You heading south?" he asks, squinting. "Plenty of work in Thebes. If the gods favor the winds." You hesitate, then nod. It's easier to move with people than to stay and watch a city suffocate. As the boat pushes away, the Nile glitters like liquid bronze. The shoreline shrinks. On deck, sailors chant rhythmic verses to keep time with the oars. One strums a lyre, another spits into the river for luck. It's not superstition. Well, it is, but it's also insurance, the ancient kind. Disease, famine, crocodiles, take your pick. A blessing never hurts. The merchants joke as they work, but beneath it all lingers unease. One unwraps a loaf of bread and mutters that his cousin in Memphis fell sick after trading with foreigners. Another insists it's the foreigners who bring such curses. Syrians, Nubians, Persians. Someone else points out that the Nile itself carries sickness, and it's as Egyptian as we are. Their debate fades into the wind, unresolved. Historians still argue whether ancient trade routes spread smallpox across Africa before or after Egypt's rise. But either way, the truth floats right here, on this very water, in this very breath. You watch as cargo shifts beneath the deck, jars sealed with mud and rope, each containing goods, or germs, destined for another port. It's a strange thing, how prosperity and peril travel in the same crates. By midday, the heat beats down mercilessly. The sailors cover their heads with linen cloths, soaked in river water. You join them, gulping from a shared jug. The water tastes slightly off, like clay and salt. Maybe it's safe, maybe not. No one thinks twice. Thirst doesn't wait for certainty. At night, the stars burn low over the current. You lie on the deck, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, listening to the sound of frogs along the reeds. The man with the Anubis tattoo leans beside you. They say small demons live in the water, he murmurs, and when the wind blows west, they wake. You almost laugh, but stop. Who's to say he's wrong? To people without microscopes, the unseen world is full of spirits. To us, it's just particles. The distance between faith and science is sometimes one invention away. By morning, the barge docks at a riverside town. It's smaller, quieter, but not untouched. You notice a red mark painted on several doorposts, two crossing lines that mean illness inside. The villagers keep to themselves. They don't forbid trade, but they don't welcome strangers either. A woman selling pottery wears a scarf across her face. More for ritual than protection, but the effect is eerily familiar. You realize, not for the first time, how humans everywhere reach the same solutions independently. The merchants haggle, unload, and reload. Life insists on continuing. You help lift sacks of barley, and overhear a scribe bargaining for papyrus rolls. From Byblos, he says proudly. Imported goods are prized, even in a time of plague. The irony isn't lost on you. The very roots that enrich Egypt also keep it sick. A young sailor falls ill by afternoon. He says it's heat stroke, but his voice trembles. You see the tiny spots near his collarbone before he hides them. No one says a word. The captain just murmurs, "Keep him shaded," and ties a protective charm to the mast. You pretend not to notice how the rest of the crew begins to sleep farther from him. Fear has its own geometry. That night, as you sail again, the moonlight gleams on water like silver cloth. The sick sailor whispers deliriously about jackals and gods. Someone recites a prayer to Sekhmet, the lion, headed goddess of plagues and healing, she who both strikes and cures. It's an odd comfort, worshipping the very deity that causes your suffering, but it fits Egypt's logic balance, not avoidance. The world is never purely kind or cruel, it just is. By the next morning, the sailor is gone. They wrap him in a linen sheet, weigh it with a stone, and lower him gently into the Nile. No ceremony, no wailing, just the slow ripple of water and the soft whisper of, "May relight your path." You turn away, feeling the quiet enormity of it. In this world, death is a routine, not a rupture. Still, your throat tightens. The river widens as you approach Thebes, the glorious heart of Upper Egypt. Massive pylons rise in the distance, carved with scenes of pharaohs smiting enemies and offering incense to the gods. The city looks eternal, but the smell gives it away beneath the fragrance of lotus and resin. There's sickness here too. No city, no matter how divine, escapes contagion. You disembark and wander through the harbour. Ships from Punt, Nubia, and Crete crowd the docks. Sailors cough, priests chant, and cats weave between fish stalls like little guardians of the underworld. Everywhere you turn, there's motion. The endless churn of trade, and with it, invisible life, multiplying, thriving, migrating. At a nearby tavern, you overhear two scribes debating. "The disease moves with the ships," one says. "Nonsense," replies the other. "It's the curse of offended gods." You want to interrupt, to explain viruses and transmission and incubation periods. But of course you can't. You're a ghost here, a dreamer in someone else's past. You leave the tavern and head toward the temples of Luxor, where processions are underway. Priests carry offerings to the statues of Amun and Mut, pleading for cleansing. Incense thickens the air. The crowd sways, chanting, a wave of faith against an invisible tide. You feel it. The unity, the desperate beauty of belief. Even without modern medicine, they understand the need for collective action, for ritual as morale. A child hands you a lotus flower, its white petals trembling. "For luck," she says. Her palm is warm. You take it carefully, knowing that even a gesture so pure could carry danger. But you can't refuse. To accept it feels like honoring something ancient. The stubborn grace that keeps humans reaching for each other, even in times of fear. That night, you sleep on the temple steps, the lotus beside you. The moon reflects off the river, and you imagine it carrying not just goods and sickness, but stories. The entire human habit of touching, trading, trying again. Smallpox, like love or music, is a passenger on the current of connection. It destroys, yes, but it also reveals how deeply entangled we all are. You drift into dreams where ships sail endlessly, their sails made of parchment, their oars beating to the rhythm of human breath. The Nile glows beneath them, whispering secrets in languages yet to be born. Somewhere, far in the future, someone will find a mummy, trace scars on ancient skin, and wonder how the disease reached so far. You'll know the answer. It was always the river. Morning breaks over Thebes with a bleached sort of brightness, the kind that makes the limestone glow like bone. You wake to the sound of reed pens scratching on papyrus, a sound that seems to echo through every corner of the ancient city. The scribes are already at work, bent over scrolls in the temple courtyard, recording, always recording. They document everything: harvests, births, taxes, offerings, and now, death. You drift closer, careful not to disturb the rhythm. Rows of young men sit cross-legged before low tables, their backs straight despite the heat. Each scribe moves with a ritual precision, dipping his pen into ink made from soot and gum. Their faces are calm, but their eyes, those give them away. They're tired. The columns of names never end. The head scribe, an older man with a thin beard and a voice like dry papyrus, notices your shadow. You have the look of someone curious, he says. Most pass by without wanting to know. You nod, and he gestures for you to sit. On the scroll before him, a heading reads record of the year of the Great Feather. You recognize a few hieroglyphs: the sun disk of Ra, the hieratic symbol for death, repeated again and again. These are the ones we remember, he explains. Not all are named, but all are counted. To forget a death is to anger the soul. He pauses, sharpening his pen. Some cities do not count at all. They think if they stop writing, the fever will end. But silence is a poor cure. You study the scroll, the neat columns, the careful spacing. It looks orderly, almost beautiful, until you realize each mark is a life gone. The illusion of control in the face of chaos. It's a deeply human instinct, perhaps the most enduring one. Nearby, a priest kneels before a small altar, burning incense for Thoth, god of writing. The smoke curls upward, curling like script itself. The priest whispers a prayer for steady hands and clear ink. You can almost feel the desperation woven into every word. If they can't stop the dying, they can at least record it faithfully, preserve it like a promise. Beyond the temple gates, heralds cry out the day's decrees. You wander closer, blending with the crowd. The air smells of sweat, smoke, and faint decay. A proclamation is being read. Families are to mark their homes if illness strikes, and healers must report deaths to the scribal houses within 2 days. It's bureaucracy dressed as faith. And for the first time, you realize you're witnessing one of history's earliest attempts at public health policy. A woman in the crowd scoffs, and who reports the scribes when they fall sick. She mutters. You almost smile. Sarcasm survives any century. As you walk through the city streets, you notice small clay tablets nailed beside doorways, each etched with a name and a symbol of protection. The Ankh, the Scarab, the Eye of Rai. Death here isn't hidden. It's accounted for, talked about, woven into the civic fabric. In modern times we track death with data. Here, they do it with art and prayer. Different tools, same impulse to make sense of loss. By noon, you reach the necropolis across the river. The valley hums with the work of embalmers. You can hear the scrape of metal tools, the hiss of natron being poured into linen, wrapped bodies. The smell is strange, resinous, sharp, not entirely unpleasant. You realize this too is a kind of record keeping, though made of flesh and salt instead of ink. Every mummy is an archive, every tomb a library of one. An embalmer greets you with a wary smile. "We make them eternal," he says, his hands slick with oil. Though lately, the queue is long. He gestures toward the waiting bodies. A line that seems endless. You ask how he keeps track of so many. He points to a scribe sitting nearby, tallying each body's arrival, noting their offerings, their family names, their place of origin. When the gods ask, "We'll have the numbers ready," the embalmer says. It's bureaucratic immortality. The idea that to be written down is to keep existing. You think of how many names vanish simply because no one had ink or time to record them. History isn't just memory. It's survival through documentation. Later, you find yourself in a scriptorium carved into the temple wall. The air is cool, the silence sacred. The scribes here don't speak, they copy. One man's task is to inscribe omens, dreams, eclipses, floods, all listed beside deaths, as though trying to decode divine handwriting. When the moon hid behind the sun, 500 perished, he writes carefully. When the ibis flew north too early, the fever spread again. Historians still argue whether these records were superstition or early epidemiology. Maybe they were both. You touch a roll of papyrus gently. It's rough under your fingertips, fragile yet enduring. You wonder how many centuries it might survive, buried in sand, waiting to tell its story again. The thought gives you an odd comfort, even in chaos. Someone is always watching, writing, remembering. Outside, the city continues to breathe. You pass a funeral procession. Mourners in linen, carrying baskets of flowers and jars of beer. They sing softly, voices rising and falling like waves. Grief here is communal, choreographed, public. Yet, in a quiet corner, you see a young man sitting alone, carving a single name into the wall with a broken reed. No ceremony, no priest, just memory made tangible. That night, back by the river, you find a group of scribes gathered under torchlight. They're sharing food and stories. The day's records, yes, but also jokes, gossip, dreams. One of them laughs and says, "If Thoth ever tires of us, we'll run out of ink before we run out of words." You can tell it's half a joke, half a fear. Their lives depend on writing, not just to feed themselves, but to make sense of the dying world around them. You lie back, staring at the stars. The night sky over Thebes looks like a scroll of its own. Endless lines of glowing symbols, unreadable yet meaningful. Somewhere among them, maybe, the gods are keeping their own tallies. Maybe they, too, are scribes, struggling to stay caught up with the living. Tomorrow, more ink will flow. More names will be written. And you'll realize the truth of this place. Civilizations don't survive because of kings or monuments. They survive because of the quiet hands that keep the records, the ones who turn loss into language. By the time you reach the royal quarter, the city of Thebes feels like a living contradiction, magnificent and miserable, brilliant and fevered. You walk along streets paved with sun-baked clay. Past statues so enormous they seem to breathe, their carved eyes forever watching. The temples shimmer with gold leaf and blue faience, yet just beyond their walls, disease still spreads like rumor. The palace itself is quieter than you expect. You can hear the rustle of linen robes, the muted thud of sandaled feet, and the faint metallic clink of jewelry. Guards stand at attention with their kopsh swords, glinting in the sun. Though you notice one of them swaying slightly, fever-bright eyes hidden behind his helmet. Even the elite can't escape the invisible enemy. Inside, the air smells of honey, lotus, and disinfecting mirror. The royal physicians have done what they can, fumigating chambers, burning herbs, sprinkling natron water on the doorframes. You pass a servant carefully fanning a brazier to keep mosquitoes away, another trick imported from Nubia. But the truth hums in the corners. The royal family is afraid. A physician named Horemheb approaches you, his linen spotless, despite the chaos. The gods test even the pharaoh. He murmurs, leading you down a corridor lined with frescoes of Ra's daily voyage. We're balanced between faith and infection. He gestures toward a small chamber where a young prince lies sweating on a low bed. The child's skin is speckled, the same unmistakable pox marks you've seen on peasants and slaves. But here, the marks look almost tragic against gold, embroidered sheets. We cannot admit the gods would allow this in the house of life, Horemheb says. So we call it something else. A visitation, not a disease. You ask whether that helps. He smiles thinly. No. But it sounds better. He shows you a curious sight, tiny amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus, each dipped in perfumed oil and tied around the boy's wrists. Protection charms, he explains. Half medicine, half hope. You can't tell which half he believes in more. In another room, scribes record the prince's condition on parchment, charting fever spikes and lunar phases. It's meticulous, a blend of superstition and proto-science. Historians still argue whether these notes were medicine or ritual. Horemheb says, I say they were both. Sometimes faith is the only thing that keeps a hand steady. That night, the palace whispers with fear. Servants walk barefoot to muffle their steps, and priests chant through the corridors, scattering lotus petals as offerings. You catch a glimpse of the queen, pale beneath her cowl, standing before a statue of Isis, murmuring for mercy. Her lips tremble, but her posture never breaks. Queens don't get to collapse. You think of how fragile divine rule becomes when faced with human illness. The pharaoh might be a god on earth, but smallpox doesn't care for titles. The contrast is dizzying. The most powerful family in Egypt, brought low by something invisible. As you wander out into the gardens, the night air wraps around you like velvet. The pools glimmer with torchlight, lotus flowers floating like tiny moons. A few courtiers are gathered around a storyteller, his voice low and rhythmic, telling the tale of Sekhmet, the lioness, goddess who once brought plague upon humankind, only to be soothed by beer dyed red to look like blood. The courtiers listen intently, sipping their own cups of dark owl, pretending it's just a story and not a mirror. The storyteller catches your eye and grins faintly. We drink to forget what we can't cure, he says. It's the oldest medicine. You join him, the bitter beer grounding you in the moment. You wonder if this mixture of myth and mortality is what's kept Egypt enduring for millennia. Not denial, but the graceful weaving of fear into ritual. By dawn, the prince's fever breaks, not from divine intervention or poultices, but from sheer luck, the kind that spares some and not others. The palace erupts in relief, and offerings flood the temples, gold, incense, fresh fruit. The gods have spared us, a priest proclaims. You can almost hear the universe chuckle in reply. Later, you watch the royal scribes add a new line to their records. The plague has waned. The gods have smiled upon Egypt. You know it's temporary, that another wave will come, another fever, another name for the same terror. But for now, people need to believe in reprieve. Belief, after all, is its own kind of medicine. You wander to the balcony overlooking the city. The Nile glimmers, eternal and indifferent. Barges drift lazily, their sails catching the early light. You see fishermen, priests, laborers, all alive, all unaware of the fragile reprieve they've been granted. Horemheb joins you, his face unreadable. When this passes, he says, the priests will call it a miracle. The scribes will record it as history. But those of us who watched will just call it a lesson. You ask him what kind. That we never really conquer death, he says softly. We just negotiate temporary truces. He offers you a piece of linen soaked in cedar oil, a makeshift mask. Wear it, he adds with a faint smirk. You can never be too careful, even if the gods are smiling. You take it, tying the cloth around your face. The smell is sharp and calming. For a fleeting second, it feels like a bridge between millennia. The same human instinct you'd see centuries later, when plagues strike again and again. Masks, herbs, prayers, the rituals change, but the fear doesn't. As the morning sun climbs higher, Thebes seems renewed. Music returns to the courtyards, children laugh again, and traders shout prices from stalls. But you've seen behind the polished stone walls, seen how thin the line is between divine favor and disaster. You pass a small statue of Sekhmet on your way out, her lioness eyes glinting. Someone's left a fresh garland around her neck. Maybe, just maybe, appeasement works. Or maybe people simply need to believe it does. The scribes keep writing, the priests keep praying, and the city resumes its rhythm, as if nothing happened. But you know better. Every fever leaves a ghost in its wake, whispering reminders through the corridors of time. And as the palace fades behind you, you realize this civilization isn't measured by monuments or gods, but by how gracefully it hides its fear of dying. The Nile's current pulls you southward, away from Thebes and toward the smaller towns that fringe its banks. Places less gilded, less remembered, yet more alive in their stubbornness. You drift past groves of date palms, their shadows slicing the water into stripes of gold and ink. The air feels different here. Quieter, less perfumed, more real. You can smell wet clay, goat dung, and the faint sweetness of fermenting beer. The people wave as you pass, sun dark and smiling despite everything. It strikes you again how resilient they are. These villagers who've buried loved ones, endured fevers, and yet rise each dawn to harvest grain or mend nets. They live as though survival is the oldest ritual of all. You disembark at a small dock, where fishermen haul up nets heavy with tilapia. One of them, his back bent but his grin wide, greets you with the casual friendliness of someone who's seen it all. The gods take, the gods give. He shrugs, handing you a fresh fish. The river forgets quickly. You follow the narrow path to the heart of the village. The walls here are rough mud brick, patched and repatched through generations. Children play with reed toys, dogs doze in the shade, and smoke curls from clay ovens. There's laughter, but beneath it, the quiet caution of people who've seen sickness too many times to trust peace. A healer sits beneath a fig tree, surrounded by baskets of herbs, coriander, garlic, honey, and crushed juniper berries. She's older than the river looks, her eyes sharp as obsidian. "You've got the look of someone who's been in Thebes," she says. You nod. Then you've seen how the fancy folk pray louder when they're scared. You ask her if she fears smallpox. She snorts. Fear is for those who can afford it. We just keep moving. She grinds herbs into a paste and smears it over a young boy's arms, murmuring words that sound half medical, half magical. Sometimes the words heal more than the herbs, she admits, glancing at you. But don't tell the priests I said that. You notice smallpox scars on her own arms, faint but unmistakable. She catches your gaze and smiles. "I lived," she says simply. "That's my proof of favor." Historians still argue whether such survivors were seen as cursed or blessed. In some towns, they became healers themselves, proof of resilience, living amulets against despair. You watch her work, deft and deliberate, as though every motion is part of a larger conversation with the earth itself. By midday, the heat turns the air syrup, thick. The healer invites you into her hut, where clay jars line the walls like sentinels. She opens one. It's filled with honey, viscous and golden. "Best medicine there is," she says, dipping her finger. Sweet enough to trick the soul into staying. You sit, sipping cool water, as she tells you stories of plagues that came with foreign traders, of omens in the sky, of the year the Nile ran red with silt and everyone thought it was blood. "We thought it was the gods punishing us," she says. But now I think the gods, just like a good story. Outside, the village drums begin to thump. Not for mourning this time, but for a festival. The people are celebrating the end of the sickness. They dance barefoot on packed earth, their bodies moving with reckless gratitude. You join them, feet dusty, hands raised. There's no fear in the rhythm, only release. Later, as dusk paints the sky violet, you sit by the river again. The healer joins you, her hands clasped over her knees. You know, she says, we used to think disease was a god's whisper. But maybe it's just nature reminding us that we're guests here. You nod. It feels true. More than any temple inscription or royal decree. She watches the river for a long moment before adding, still, I like to whisper back. Just so the gods know I'm listening. You smile. What do you say to them? That I'm still here. The words settle between you like a benediction. Night deepens. The stars rise, sharp and endless, mirrored perfectly in the black water. Somewhere upstream, the scribes of Thebes are still writing, the priests are still praying, and the royal family still believes themselves chosen. But here, by the riverbank, the truth feels simpler. Life endures because people do. You stretch out on the sand, listening to the frogs and the wind moving through reeds. The healer hums softly beside you, a lullaby older than writing. Her voice fades into the sounds of the night water lapping, crickets singing, the steady breathing of a land that has seen everything and still dares to sleep. As your eyes close, you realize this is the quiet miracle Egypt perfected, not immortality, but continuity. Not defeating death, but coexisting with it, dancing on its edge, singing anyway. When you wake at dawn, mist drifts low over the water. The healer is gone, but her jars remain. Small guardians of honey, herbs, and memory. The village stirs to life again, ready for another day under the eternal sun. You take one last look at the Nile, its surface smooth as glass. For a heartbeat, you almost see faces in its reflection. The ones you've met, the ones who've vanished. The countless unnamed who built this place with their breath and bones. The river carries them all forward, blurring their edges, but never erasing them. You step into your boat and push off. The current catches you, steady and sure. Behind you, the village hums awake. Ahead, the horizon gleams like promise. You realize that maybe, just maybe, this ancient world wasn't meant to be survived for a day. It was meant to be witnessed. So you could remember how fiercely, how beautifully, people lived even when they knew they wouldn't last. The journey north brings you into the delta, that vast green maze where the Nile splits and meanders into the Mediterranean. The air is heavy with salt and silt, the horizon wide and hazy. The soundscape changes. 2 frogs croak from the marshes, ibis birds cry overhead, and the reeds whisper secrets to the wind. You've left the grandeur of Thebes behind, but in its place comes something older, quieter, the hum of continuity. Villages cling to the edges of the canals like beads on a necklace. Life here feels gentler, but no less deliberate. Farmers bend over flooded fields, their reflections shimmering beside them. Fishermen cast nets from papyrus boats, singing in rhythm with their oars. Even after plagues, after floods, after famine, they keep at it, steady as the river itself. You realize this is Egypt's secret, endurance masquerading as normalcy. You stop at a riverside market, drawn by the smell of baked bread and roasted duck. Merchants shout prices. Children weave through crowds with baskets of figs, and everywhere you look, there are signs of recovery. The scars of smallpox have faded into stories now, retold like campfire lessons. Remember the year the fever took the scribes, or the time the prince nearly joined the gods too soon. At one stall, an old man sells charms carved from soapstone, eyes of Horus, tiny scarabs, symbols of rebirth. He presses one into your hand. To keep your name remembered, he says. You smile, realizing that's what everyone in this world is really fighting for. Not immortality, but remembrance. The market buzzes around you, alive with smells and colors, proof that people will always rebuild. You overhear a scribe arguing good-naturedly with a farmer about how the fever started.
It came with Nubian traders!
The scribe insists. No, it was the priest's incense. The farmer laughs. Historians still argue the same thing, millennia later. Maybe the debate itself is part of the ritual, a way to make chaos make sense. You wander toward the riverbank where a group of children splash in the shallows, their laughter pure and defiant. Some of them bear the pitted marks of the disease, yet they grin like they've conquered the world. Their mothers watch from the reeds, weaving mats and singing softly. The melody carries a line you almost understand. The river forgets, but we remember. It hits you then, how easily history smooths out the rough edges. When people think of ancient Egypt, they picture gold masks, temples, pharaohs. But it's this muddy, imperfect, human persistence that really built civilization. Not kings, but potters and healers, scribes and mothers. The ones who refused to stop living even when everything tried to stop them. As you drift farther downstream, you notice shrines at the water's edge. Some are simple clay altars with lotus offerings, others bear carved names of the dead. Each one is a conversation between the living and those who've gone, a quiet, eternal exchange. You pause at one, laying down the stone charm the old man gave you. For the ones who wrote, you whisper, thinking of the scribes in Thebes, and for the ones who kept breathing. The wind stirs, lifting papyrus leaves, carrying your words downstream. Somewhere far away, you imagine they might reach another shore, another age, where someone else will read the marks you've made and feel less alone. By evening, the sky bleeds orange and pink. You pass a procession on the river, a funeral barge, its deck lined with mourners holding candles. They're singing a hymn to Osiris, god of renewal. You listen as the notes ripple across the water, fragile and luminous. Even here, death sounds like a promise. You realize that in a world built on cycles, flood, drought, birth, decay, perhaps smallpox too, was just another reminder. Everything ends, and everything begins again. Egypt never feared endings. It prepared for them beautifully. You dock near the mouth of the delta as night descends. The stars rise one by one, glinting like hieroglyphs in the dark. You stretch out on the sand, exhausted and strangely peaceful. The air smells of salt and memory. You think back on your impossible day. The markets, the tombs, the laughter, the fevered breaths, the ink-stained fingers of the scribes. Somehow, in this endless churn of life and death, the Egyptians found meaning not in control, but in acceptance. They never pretended to conquer time. They just learned to live gracefully within it. The night deepens. The water laps softly at the shore. You let your eyes close, the world blurring into sound. Reeds whispering, distant hymns fading, the heartbeat of the river steady as sleep itself. And before you drift away, you hear the faintest echo of a voice, half memory, half dream, saying, "You wouldn't last a day here, but oh, what a day it would be." Now, as you lie there, let everything soften. Imagine the night air cooling your skin, the stars flickering like ancient lamps in the sky. You can still smell the faint sweetness of lotus and the river's breath. Clean, eternal. The fever, the noise, the fear, all of it drifts away like silt in slow water. Breathe deeply. Each inhale brings in calm. Each exhale lets go of centuries of dust and noise. You're no longer standing in the market, or crossing the river, or tracing the scars of forgotten plagues. You're simply resting. Here, now, safe and still. Let the sounds fade one by one, the scribes' pens, the chants, the rustle of linen. In their place comes the gentle hush of quiet. That sacred silence the ancients knew when the sun sank and the gods watched over sleeping cities. You can almost hear the Nile lapping against the shore, carrying your thoughts downstream, where they'll dissolve into peace. Somewhere in the distance, a heron calls, slow, soft, final. The stars seem to lean closer, not to watch, but to keep you company. The story fades, but its warmth lingers. The resilience of a people who turned suffering into art, who faced death with grace and gold. Let that image settle in your mind. Light flickering across the river, endless, gentle, steady. So close your eyes, breathe in once more, and as the ancient world slips quietly into dream, let yourself follow. You've survived your 24 hours in Egypt, or at least long enough to remember what it meant to live there. Sweet dreams.